All right, I think we have settled close to a number, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Adam Sapp. I'm the Assistant Vice President and Director of Admission at Pomona College. I'm going to be your MC for the first part of this talk today. We are really, really glad that you are here. So many of you are joining us from around the world, and we couldn't be happier about that. I do want to just start with a couple housekeeping announcements, and that is that we are recording today's session and that closed caption is available if you click on the live transcript CC button on your Zoom. You will be able to have the assistance of closed caption. Like I said earlier, my name is Adam, and I'm joined by 5 fantastic colleagues who are going to introduce themselves in a moment. But just to refresh you, you have joined the 6 colleges international session, and we are very happy that you are here. We know many of you are students. We might have a couple parents here. We know we have some college counselors here. This is a come one, come all audience, and we are really excited to be speaking to you at whatever time it is in your home. It's morning in my space. It might be lunchtime near where my colleagues are. But one of the things that we want to do today is we want to do a presentation in 3 parts. So we're going to begin with some introductions where you get to learn a little bit about each one of our institutions. This will be real short, so maybe 2 or 3 minutes per institution. We then have some topics that we want to talk to you about. We know many of you are starting your college search right now or just started it recently, and you are perhaps at the beginning of what is a long and fun and engaging journey to learn more about colleges. So we feel like there are some things that we want to talk to you about so that you can think about some big topics as you begin your college search. We're going to then move into a Q&A. We encourage you to place your questions in the Q&A box. Please keep them out of the chat if you can. It's better if they're in the Q&A box. It allows us to respond and have a better way of getting back to you more quickly. And then we also have time at the end where we'll move into some breakout sessions so that you can hop from school to school and talk to individual officers should that be of interest to you at the end. All right, so we're going to start with a broader overview of each institution. We're going to go in alphabetical order, which means we're going to start with Jasmine at Amherst.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Hardy. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an assistant dean of admission at Amherst. And one of the reasons it's so fun to be able to do these events is because all 6 of these institutions are so amazing. And we'll have time after, like Adam said, in breakout rooms to talk about individual aspects of our schools. But just to give a little bit of an overview of Amherst and what makes Amherst a little bit different. So the first thing is we have an open curriculum. There are no required classes at Amherst. Students at Amherst come and choose every single one of their classes that they want to take. We also are part of a 5-college consortium. So we're located in Western Massachusetts, and in our area, there are 4 other colleges and universities. So as a student at Amherst, you're able to take advantage of not only the classes and extracurricular opportunities at Amherst, but also at the other 4 institutions. And finally, one of the biggest reasons we like to do these events together is because we're all so committed to financial aid. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But at Amherst, we offer need-blind admission for all students, including international students, and we meet 100% of demonstrated need with financial aid. We do not package any loans as part of our aid packages. So I'll pass it over to Bowdoin now, and happy to answer any questions in the future.
Hi, thank you so much for taking some of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're calling in from. It's really nice to meet all of you. My name is Jackie. I'm a senior assistant dean of admissions here at Bowdoin in beautiful Brunswick, Maine. Just a couple of highlights about Bowdoin. First off, our mascot is the polar bear, which we always like to lead with because we think it's the best. But it also as a symbol, represents a lot of the intellectual risk-taking that we encourage among our students. Our mascot is the polar bear because one of our alum was the first person to reach the North Pole. And I think that that in a lot of ways expresses in like one sentence the intellectual adventurism that we encourage among our students. The other parts of our education that we like to highlight in sub 30 seconds is our location along the coast of Maine and the ways in which our students are able to engage with research right on the Gulf of Maine to talk about things like climate change and other huge questions looming over our time, and also our emphasis on the common good throughout our curriculum. So happy to chat more about that in the college fair portion of this afterwards, but I will hand it off to my colleague from Carleton.
Thanks, Jackie. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Swan, Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions and Coordinator of International Recruitment at Carleton College. Carleton is located not in the East Coast, not on the West Coast, but right in the middle of the United States, the upper Midwest of Minnesota. We're about 40 minutes south of Minneapolis, St. Paul, in a small town of about 20,000 people. And in Carleton, some things that stand out about us is our academic calendar. We operate on a trimester schedule. We break the year into 3 10-week terms, which gives you a lot of flexibility in choosing courses from across our curriculum. Carleton is also a place where everyone is required to do research before they graduate. So if you want to do a deep dive into something and have it be interdisciplinary or do multiple research projects, as you'll have the opportunity to do that at a place like Carleton. Carleton's also known for being quite environmentally sustainable. We were the first college in the United States to own its own utility grade wind turbine. We actually have 2 wind turbines. We get about 50% of our energy from the wind. Last fun fact about Carleton is we actually have a house on campus dedicated for baking cookies. In addition to the great academics and the great community, we're also a school that meets 100% demonstrated need for all admitted international students. There's more I'm happy to tell you during our breakout, but right now I want to pass it to my colleague from Pomona, Adam.
Thanks, Brian. Again, my name is Adam from Pomona. This is Pomona in my background. We're situated in Claremont, California, which is about 35 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. LAX is our home airport, and we are actually in Los Angeles County. We're on the eastern side of LA County, which, if you don't know, LA is the second largest city in the United States. It provides lots of opportunities for internships, cultural engagement, lots of festivals, the arts, many things happening in LA. And one of the things that I think is also important, though Pomona is a standalone liberal arts college with 1,600 students and a student to faculty ratio of 8:1, an average class size of 15. We are part of what's called the Claremont Colleges, which is a consortium of schools that includes Scripps, Pitzer, Harvey Mudd, and Claremont McKenna. And along with Pomona, we are the Claremont Colleges. And so the concept is very simple. You attend one school, but you can take classes at all 5. You live at one school, but you can participate in extracurricular activities and eat in any of the dining halls at any of the 5 campuses. And so Pomona has that broad-based liberal arts education, like all of us have. And we also have the resources of a much larger place, about 6,000 undergraduates at the Claremont Colleges, about 1,600 at Pomona. There's lots more I want to say about our 48 majors and lots of ways to study abroad and financial aid as well, but I'll save that for the breakout. I'll hand it to my colleague from Swarthmore.
Thanks, Adam. And hi, everybody. Welcome to our session. My name is Yoquin Jo. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Assistant Dean of Admissions at Swarthmore. Again, props to you all for doing this on a Monday. We're really glad you're here. And again, right, there are lots of things to say about Swarthmore, but I'll just lift up a few things that are unique. So we are very close to a major city in the US on the East Coast. So we're just about 20 minutes on the train outside of Philadelphia. So have access to all the amazing opportunities available in the city. But we have a beautiful Arboretum campus, which you can see right here as well. In terms of academics, the things to know, we have a pass-fail first semester. So no grades the very first semester in your college experience. So we want you to explore, we want you to take academic and intellectual risks. We want you to get your grasp on how to be a college student for the first time, right? So you'll have that for the first semester. And we also are one of the few liberal arts colleges that offer engineering. So you have you can explore, the sub areas of engineering, but still have that strong Liberal Arts Foundation. And then last but certainly not least, we also have a unique honors program, which is different from the honors program you might be familiar with. So you get to do really in-depth research on one particular topic in your fields of study, and you get to be examined by the world experts on this very matter that have nothing to do with Swarthmore, right? But maybe there are top researchers in the field, right? Curators of the Louvre, members of the World Bank, but we want you to engage with the top of the world on the topics you're interested in. So thanks very much, and I'll pass it on to my colleague from Williams.
Hello, everyone. I am Marcus Burns. I'm an Associate Director of Admission here at Williams. I oversee our international recruitment efforts and selection, and happy to be here and talk to you about some great places here. So Williams is located in Williamstown, Massachusetts, which is about 3 hours from Boston and New York City. So there are cities, yes, you can get to, but students do spend their time on our campus. We have a residential campus, and we're a liberal arts college focused on our undergraduates. So when you think about the actual students on our campus, there's just over 2,000 undergraduates, and then we represent more than 90 different countries. There's more than 70 different languages spoken amongst our students. So really trying to make sure that we're bringing the world to our campus so our students can come and learn together. And so a major way that that's happening is going to be in our classes, small classes. The average is just 13 students per class. And we actually have classes called tutorials, which are just 2 students and the professor. And you can be in those classes from the moment you step on our campus, because we truly do value the perspective that every single student is bringing and value your intelligence and offer those to our students. And also, we meet 100% of demonstrated need, but an important thing to know is more than 60% of our international students do receive financial aid. And so for every single student at Williams that receives financial aid, Williams pays for all of your books and materials necessary to take every single class throughout your years here, because we want to make sure that all these thoughts are represented in every single department. So that's just a little bit about Williams. And so kind of before we get to the actual questions that you all have been Q&Aing in and writing in, so thank you, please keep those coming. We did, as my colleague Adam mentioned earlier, we did have a few things we wanted to make sure that we talked about as you kind of begin or continue your college search process, a few things we thought might be helpful. So certainly a major piece of that is going to be, can my family afford this? Is this going to work for us, right? Because you don't want to get in love with a place and then actually start to think about money afterwards, right? So it might be something you want to think about in the beginning, and that's part of kind of why we travel here or why we're doing these presentations together. So I'll ask my colleague Yo Quinn to talk a little bit about that for us, please.
Thank you, Marcus. Yeah, so I imagine it's an important question in all of your minds, right? How do I pay for college, right? How are the ways that I can afford a college education in the US? And you heard some terms that we used earlier about meet blind, right? Meet full need. What does that all mean, right? So the first part is that to know there are lots of terms that you'll run into, right? So it might be helpful to start your start your notes, right? Take notes of what does term mean, right? What term do I use when I ask questions? So I think the first part of that is how a school evaluates your application, right? So you heard the term need blind, which means that your financial need is not considered as part of your admission decision, right? So all of us are meet full need in this group of colleges, but you'll see that Amherst is the one that meets that are need blind, right, for all international citizens as well as domestic students. So that is one piece, right, how a college evaluates your application. And then there's another piece, how they will meet your financial need, right? So you heard from all of us that we are committing to meet full need. So that means if we decide to admit a student, whether domestic or international student, we want them to afford, right, to be able to afford education here. So whatever their need is, if that's the full cost of attendance, we will give them that money, right, so that they can come to one of our schools. So that's called meeting 100% of your determined or demonstrated need of your family. And then third part of that is what is actually in that financial aid decision, right? So we talked about giving you money. We say 100%, of what you need is in this package, but think about what is actually in those packages, right? So a lot of times students are like, can I get a full ride? Can I get a full scholarship, right? So I think a lot of times students are thinking about merit-based scholarship, but all of our schools here, we practice mostly need-based financial aid, which means whatever you need is whatever we give you, right? Merit-based scholarship is different. It means that if you are a good student or if you have certain talents, right, in the arts or in sports, then you get money, which is different from need-based, right? So again, when you think about, oh, can I get a full ride here? Well, if you if your need is if your family need is as high as the full cost of attendance, then yes, you will get a full ride from any of our schools if you were to be admitted. So those are some important things to think about as you navigate, the many different types of institutions and the financial aid piece. But just so you know, again, we all have this commitment of meeting 100% of families' needs, and that's why we do a lot of these things together. So I'll turn it back to Adam, back to Marcus, who will walk us through some more topics we'll talk about in the college search.
Thank you, Yoquin. And so, yes, finance is very important. And then once you figured out, right, what can work for you and your family and what kind of schools might work for that, then we want to think about actually applying. So filling out those applications and how does that work? So one thing is to think about actual just application platforms, because different schools will use different kinds of applications. So Adam, would you mind talking a bit about that, please, and choosing an application platform?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is really important as you do your research is that you will come to see that different applications ask for slightly different things. Generally, all applications are going to want biographical information, maybe interests about that you have that are academic interests, like majors. Maybe they all ask for, some ask for an essay, some don't. So one of the things you really want to understand is what does the application require, and then why would you choose that application over others if the institution accepts multiple applications. So there's the common application, which many of you may have heard of. There's the coalition application, which many schools accept the coalition application, but it is a kind of a smaller number than the number that accept the common app. And then there's even a third kind of application, which none of us here have, but is common in the United States, and it's called the institution-specific application. So there might be schools that you're applying to, maybe a public university or maybe a large private university, even in the US, sometimes has its own application. And so you do want to take a look at that because that could be one other way to apply. The things to consider are going to be basically, especially if you are considering cost, does that application have a fee waiver option? And if you qualify for the fee waiver, would that be something that would be of interest to you? As one of the things you'll discover when you apply to colleges, it can get a little expensive because each of us have a fee to apply. Many of us have lots of easy ways to waive the fee, but some institutions that's a little easier on the application, on one application than another. So that's something to consider, is the opportunity for fee waivers. Another one might be what's actually required in that application. So some institution-specific applications may ask for an additional essay, or they may not have an essay requirement. But if you use the common application, you are going to have to submit a personal statement. And you also may have a supplement, or what's called questions, that are institutional questions that are in addition to the common app, that may require you to write short answers or another long essay response to a question that is asked specifically by that institution. The coalition works the same way. Some coalition partners have an extra essay, others don't. And so that's something that you want to look at too, because you do want to make sure you're scheduling enough time to give yourself the ability to put together a really strong essay, and the amount of writing that any particular application requires will play a role in that. And then the other one is going to be your list of colleges. What does your list look like in the end? After you get done with your searching and you have your list, is there one platform that actually all of the schools that happen to be on your list use? Well, that might be an easier platform, because then you can just do the application once and then submit it multiple times. But it might be the case that 2 of your colleges are on the coalition, 4 of your colleges are on the common app, and 1 or 2 of your colleges has an institution-specific application. That means in order to apply to those 7 or 8 schools, you might need to use 3 different applications, which isn't bad. It just takes time to plan out. And so make sure you're giving yourself that amount of time. So platform is important, and it is something that you should think about. Marcus?
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. And so then once you've figured out which platform you're going to use, then it's important to think about when you actually apply to these schools, because deadlines matter. So you need to know when you need to fill these applications out, right? So you can start backdating and figure out when you're going to start them and things like that. So Jasmine, would you mind talking to us a bit about different kinds of application rounds, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Marcus. So we use these terms in admission that sometimes it's helpful to sort of focus in on what they really mean, right? So we're thinking about timelines. So you're thinking about when you're going to be getting your application together. So we have three different terms that we use. So the first is early decision. So our early decision rounds are on the early side of the application round, right? You can figure that out. But it also means that those rounds are binding and a little bit more restrictive. So what that means is if you're choosing to apply early decision to a school, you're choosing to apply to one school. You can't apply early decision to a lot of schools. And you know that that school is your top choice. Typically, our early decision deadlines are late October and into November, somewhere around there. Our deadlines will differ a little bit from school to school, but it's earlier in the process. I'll talk more about the pros and cons of early decision after we talk about the other two different rounds you can apply in. The second is early action. So the early action round is also earlier in the cycle, but it's not a binding commitment, meaning it doesn't mean you have to go to that school if you apply early action to one of our schools. It is a little bit more restrictive than the third option, which is regular decision. So the third option for you to apply is a little bit later in the cycle, and that's regular decision. It's not binding, it's not restrictive. You can apply to as many schools as you want, regular decision. Typically, the regular decision deadline is going to be end of December, early January, somewhere around there for each of our schools. Okay, so within those three options, early decision, early action, and regular decision, there are a few pros and cons to each option, right? So for early decision, if you're admitted early decision, right, you apply to one school or early decision, you know it's your top choice, you love this school. If you're admitted, you're done with the process pretty early. That's great, right? Oftentimes, depending school to school, the admit rate might be a little bit higher for early decision than regular decision. That's a little bit of a numbers game in that there are fewer applications received early decision for each school. And so we might be filling parts of our class with early decision. The hard thing about early decision, so some of the cons, is that you aren't able to compare financial aid packages. Because remember, you're applying to one school early decision. So you're not able to hear from Amherst and Swarthmore and Carleton and then compare your financial aid decisions, right? So that's one con. And the other con is just that you need to know exactly which school is your favorite school early on. And a lot of students don't know that yet. And that's okay. Early action, again, is on the early side, right? So October, November deadlines, typically somewhere around there. Sometimes schools will have 2 rounds of early action. So it's not a binding decision, right? You will receive your decision a little bit earlier than regular decision. If you're not admitted early action, you might be deferred into the regular decision pool. A couple of things, though, to keep in mind about early action. While it is more flexible than early decision, it can be a little bit more limiting because some schools do have restrictive early action policies, meaning you can only apply to a certain number of schools, or there are certain things you need to do that is a little bit less flexible than regular decision. And again, you need to be on the early side of things, so you need to have your whole application put together in a way that you're excited about. The final option, regular decision, the most flexible, right? It's later, so you have a little bit more time to get your application together. And then when you do hear, so typically you'll hear, I don't know, somewhere between mid-March to mid-April, something around there, when you receive your regular decision. And you'll have the option to compare your financial aid packages, right, between different schools. You'll also have more time on the front side to be doing research on these schools. The hard things about regular decision are that it just takes longer. You won't hear until later in your academic year. And then sometimes for some schools, depending how many students they admit early decision or early action, regular decision can be a little bit more competitive. So those are the things for you to weigh as you're thinking about when you want to be applying and how you want to be applying.
Thank you, Jasmine. So good. So we've figured out. So for these schools, we'll meet 100% of your need, right? So okay, so financially it will work, and then you think about what actual application platform you want to use, right? And you narrow that down, and then you look into when you want to apply to different schools, what kind of application deadlines and things, and then we need to think about actually filling out the application. What's important when you're doing that? So Brian, would you mind talking a bit about kind of filling out the application and being your authentic self within that application?
Happy to talk about that, Marcus. Thank you. So I think it's important to also reiterate that we're all institutions that read applications holistically. When we read your application, right, we're not just looking at your results from your courses, whether it's the national results or A-levels or IB or some combination thereof, right? We're also looking at the content about what you tell us about yourself, the activities you're involved in, the writing that's submitted in your application. And so you'll hear this term a lot as you start your college search: authenticity. What does that really mean? How do you represent your authentic self? And what we're really trying to say when we say be authentic is that we want to get to know you in this process, right? We only know so much about you based off of your results, right? We know that maybe you did well in biology, or maybe you did well in a history class, but that doesn't tell us why you like that or if that's really your passion, right? And so several ways you can represent your authentic self are part of the things you're going to tell us in your activities, right? We want to know how you spend your time outside of class, whether you're playing music, a musical instrument, whether you're an athlete, whether you volunteer or involved in your faith. All those things matter to us because we're trying to get a sense of how you spend your time. And it's not just about prestigious awards or activities. It's just how you consider your time well spent. We also realize that not everyone has the same access to activities. And so if you're in a situation where you have to take care of a sibling or a family member and you don't have time for activities, that's important for us to know too, because that's how you're spending your time. And that's meaningful. And so when you list your activities in the common application or the coalition application, tell us about those things that you consider important to you, not just the things that are prestigious. Sometimes there's also the question of, do we want quantity over quality? And I think all my colleagues agree, we want depth. We want quality rather than having 18 different activities that you did for 1 year. Some other pieces of the application that let you really represent your authentic self are going to be your writing supplement, as well as the essay you submit. And so we really want your voice to come through these writing samples, right? In your essay, you should be writing about something you care about, not something that you think we will care about, something that you really care about, because that's when your authentic voice will really come through. And so, when you get to the application process, you'll see several different prompts you can choose for each essay, for each application, excuse me. But you should really think about those topics and pick something you care about, because then your authentic voice will come through your writing. In addition to that essay you'll also write a supplement. And these are going to be school specific, right? And so we really do want you to then answer those supplemental questions in a school specific way. If you're applying to Carleton, or if you're applying to Williams, or if you're applying to other schools, we want to know why it is you could see us as a future home. Don't be afraid to tap into how you feel about the fit between you and a potential institution. Some other pieces that kind of help represent your authentic self are going to be the recommendations you request from your teachers, right? We typically want teachers from your core courses, so those math, science, English sort of courses. And ideally, if you can get multiple teachers from different core subject areas, that helps us get a better sense of your academic ability in multiple fields. Even if you want to major in physics, right? Or if you want to major in history, it's okay to have recommendations from other fields than those areas that you think you maybe want to major in. Because again, it's going to help us get a sense of you in a well-rounded sort of contextual way. And really the context you can provide in your application is really, really helpful. We understand you're in different curricula. We understand you've had different life situations, especially in the pandemic these last 16 months. That additional context you can provide can be really helpful because we may have questions as we read your application. And so sharing the information about the circumstances you've gone through, about your family situation that may not be captured in other parts of the application can be really, really helpful. Finally, the last thing I'll say about sharing your authentic self is that some of the schools here have interviewing as an option, right? An interview is not designed to be a pressure-filled sort of conversation, but really a chance for you to talk to someone from one of our offices and get a chance for us to get to know you a little better, right? So you can talk about the things you're passionate about. You can talk about what you want to study. You can talk about the things that you are hoping to explore at our colleges, right? And this can be anywhere from a 25 to 35-minute conversation with one of our staff members. But it can also give you a chance to ask questions about our institutions that maybe you can that you have already or that you have during the course of the interview. It's another chance for you to learn more about us as well. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop and turn it back to my colleague Marcus.
Thank you, Brian. So lots of different pieces there that go into the actual application that you fill out. And it's important to think about all of them because we as admission officers are thinking about all of them. And that's kind of what is going to help you as you're deciding which school you'd like to go to. And it's what we look at as we're evaluating applications. So once you've gone through all of this, and now you've submitted your applications, the admission office is then going to look through them. And so for our schools here, we all use some type of holistic application process where we're looking at all of these pieces we've just mentioned and kind of putting them together as we make our decisions. So what's important to think about with that is that we don't have one particular piece of the application that it's going to trump everything else. In this holistic process, we are looking at the different pieces. We're looking at your grades and your transcripts, but we're also importantly looking at what your teachers are saying, what your recommenders are saying. We're looking at your writing in the process. We're thinking about what you are bringing to the table and how you can come to our institutions and bring all of those various different talents with you. So I've seen some of the Q&A in here, people are saying, well, what if I have this testing? Will that work for me? Will I be admitted to your school? Or if this is my GPA, or if this is my TOEFL, or whatever it is. And so that's not how it's going to work in a holistic process. We look at all of these different pieces together because we are creating communities here. And that's communities of diverse communities of individuals that are bringing all different kinds of talents to our campuses. And that's why we think the learning is so important and so vibrant, because we are bringing all different kinds of people. So we're not going to be able to tell you, this is the one activity we're looking for, or this is the one characteristic that all students from Williams have to have, or something like that, right? Because it's all going together and we're taking an individual look at every single applicant in front of us as we're doing that. And so also with the application review process, the thing to think about when you're looking at schools in the States is going to be whether or not schools are need blind or need aware, because that does factor into the application process. So as we talked about, as Joaquin talked about earlier with financial aid, there are going to be the differences of need blind, need aware. And so for us, Amherst here is going to be a need blind school in this process, and the rest of us are need aware. And most schools in the United States are going to be need aware in some way for international students. But then it's going to vary school by school how much that financial need plays in there. But it is something to make sure you know of. It is kind of a reality that many schools are going to be need aware in the process. But the important thing again is to do everything you can on your side, as my colleagues have already talked about, to kind of do that research, to be as authentic you can be within the process, and don't kind of tailor everything to one particular school. Tailor it to yourself, because that's what this is, and that's what we in our process want to know, who you are as a person, as an individual, so that we can then think about you on our campuses. And so with that, kind of, we've gone through a lot there. So I would just ask Jackie from Bowdoin, would you mind just kind of maybe sharing some tips for students, as we've talked about a whole lot here? So maybe some main things and tips to think about before we get into this actual Q&A. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. First, we're all going to say hi to Brian's kid, because going to go to college at some point. So just some tips. I think that my colleagues have honestly covered a huge portion of those tips. Brian did a phenomenal job in terms of talking about the importance of the application and putting your best foot forward, which we often express in sort of this part. And then Adam, I think, covered the multiple parts of applications that you need to think about. And so our recommendation is almost universally to start early. A lot of you in the chat have picked up on the requirement for recommendation letters or the importance of things like summer programs or extracurriculars. And so first and foremost, really, this is a great time to get started asking your teachers for recommendations. We understand that it's sort of an odd time to be getting in touch. And so the earlier, the better. The more time that you give someone to write that letter of recommendation for you, the better it will be, frankly, for them and for you. But really, and I don't want to wax on too long because I want to make sure that we have time for the fair portion. But really what all of us are looking for, and one really great way to just zoom out and look at your application on the whole, is that when each of our institutions is looking at your application, the question that we're trying to answer, or the two questions that we're trying to answer, are will you be academically successful here on our campus? And what kind of roommate will you be here? What kind of person in the dining hall will you be here? What kind of member of your community of our community will you be here? And you answer that through using the space on your application to express to us what's been important to you. I'm seeing a lot of Q&As, which obviously we're not going to be able to answer all of, but I'm seeing a ton of questions and answers about specific extracurriculars, as Marcus was literally just saying, like really specific portions of your application. Don't worry about whether or not you're doing the thing that you're doing is the thing that's going to get you into college. Worry about whether that thing is what's actually important to you, and whether that's what you value and where you put your time, and how your application actually really reflects the ways that you spend your time and the things that you value, so that when each of us read your applications, we walk away from it saying our campus would not be the same without this student here next year. So that's sort of like a wide scope zoom out of your application, and just a way to sort of focus your application materials in thinking about what you submit to us and how to be thoughtful about those materials. There are a few things that I just want to make sure that we cover before we go into breakouts, because you do have the benefit of having all 6 of us here. There's a lot of questions about being test optional in the Q&A, so I'm just going to take about 30 seconds to talk about what test optional is. But I think also the easiest way to do this is just a show of hands of who either already is test optional or will at least be for the next year in terms of SATs and ACTs. So I know that Bowdoin will be. Perfect. Okay, great. All 6 hands raised, done. So I will talk universally from the test optional point of view, which is to say that we 100% understand the difficulties that many of you have encountered trying to get SAT or ACT testing. A number of our schools were test optional to begin with and will continue to be test optional. And a number of our schools weren't test optional, but will obviously continue to be for this coming year, understanding what that is. So what that just means is that you do not have to submit ACT or SAT testing as consideration for your application. This year, more than any other year, I think you can 100% believe us when we say that we won't read into the reason why you didn't send your testing. We understand that tests are being canceled left and right. There are countries that didn't even have a testing center that was open. So test optional just means that we have waived that requirement. If you have testing, that's great. If you're proud of that testing, even better, feel free to send it in. We'll absolutely look at that as part of our holistic application review process. But if you don't have testing, either because you don't want to submit it or because you weren't able to take it, we will read the rest of your application just as it is. There's also a lot of questions about different transcripts. We read international transcripts as our job. And so those transcripts reflect, as we say to all of our applicants, those reflect the past 3 to 4 years of schooling for you and will always say more about you than any tests will. And so those transcripts are really, really important in answering that first question of whether or not you'll be academically successful here on our campuses. So that was like a long mouthful. There's about, I think we're going to take about 5 minutes. I'm just going to pull a few questions out of the Q&A that I think would be useful to be addressed, and then we'll invite you to join us in our individual breakout rooms for you to learn a little bit more about our institutions much more specifically. But a couple of minutes ago, someone had actually posed a question of what the difference is just between a liberal arts college and a university, and sort of, I think it's a really great opportunity for the 6 of us to talk about why we're here together. So I'm honestly just going to direct that at the first person I see, which is Adam, but other folks afterwards, feel free to jump in.
All right, let me give it a shot, and then I'll ask my colleagues to chime in. But one of the things, and this really gets to the genesis of this group, is that as higher education unfolded in the United States when it started, the liberal arts college is really an invention of the United States in many ways. It has a lot of tradition curricularly in the UK and in Europe, but as it manifested itself in the United States, the small college, which was dedicated to learning across multiple disciplines, grew up in the United States and is now very much a part of US higher education. And so if you are looking at the liberal arts college, the majority of them you're looking at are probably in the US, and that makes a lot of sense. In fact, many of them may be in an area of the United States called New England, where many of my colleagues are sitting right now. And as Carleton and Pomona will chime in, the Midwest and the West, as well as the South in the United States, have some liberal arts colleges as well. But the concept here, the high level concept, is to bring together lots of people with different points of views to study many subjects across multiple areas. And rather than learning a specific skill, so instead of learning how to be an accountant, for example, we instead teach you how to think, how to problem solve, how to engage difference, how to learn through difference, and in addition to multiple skills and talents that you will leave with on your way to somewhere else. For many of you, that might be a job. For some of you, that might be a professional school, law school, business school, medical school, a PhD. You might become a journalist or an engineer. There are so many ways that you can use a liberal arts degree. That's the highest level big picture I can think of. Let me ask my colleagues to chime in just to make sure that if there are some specific additions to this, they want to add them.
I mean, I'll add, because I think I saw some questions in the chat that around, if it's a liberal arts, does that mean you guys don't have science or don't do science, right? And the answer is we all have excellent science facilities and excellent science opportunities, right? Part of the liberal arts philosophy is to get that well-rounded education. That includes math and science, in addition to the arts, humanities, and social sciences. And so I think when you look at what's offered at all of our institutions, right, you're gonna have phenomenal in-depth opportunities regardless of what you're choosing to major in. Part of the benefit of that liberal arts approach is that you really get a chance to, one, work with professors much easier at liberal arts colleges than larger universities because of our size, right? All of our student populations are pretty small compared to most major universities. And so when you're in the classroom, you're working with professors, not teaching assistants, not graduate students. And that makes a huge difference when you're getting involved with research, when you're getting involved with opportunities to work with professors. You know them, they know you. You're on a first name basis with them. And so that particularly is wonderful, not just in the humanities and arts, but also in science, right? In our STEM fields, because when our professors need research assistants, they don't go to the big state university near our campuses, they go to our student body. And there are plenty of students at our campuses that have had the opportunity to be co-authors of papers with our professors doing research, not just in STEM fields, but also in other fields. There's more I could say, but I'll pause there.
Sorry, Marcus. I'll also just quickly add, right? If you're wondering, like, what's different about liberal arts, a classroom, I'll give you an example from when I was a freshman. As a liberal arts student, I was in a art history class. We're talking about 18th century Japanese art, and all of a sudden, one of my classmates goes, "Oh my God, that just reminds me of something we were just talking about in chemistry." So that blew my mind, right? That moment, and it continued to happen for the rest of my time in college. And that's the beauty of liberal arts. We're in the same classroom with engineers, right? Computer scientists, French majors, poets, and you're looking at the same problem from all these amazing angles and lenses, right? So it makes you a much more interesting person, but also a very creative problem solver. And that's what our world really needs right now. And beyond that, we also believe in the power of residential communities, right? You'll be going to classes, eating in the dining hall, going to all these activities with the people that are living around you. And you're learning from each other, right? So we understand that education is not just about learning the content knowledge, but learning from each other and learning about yourself. So yeah, that's all that you have access to at one of our schools.
Perfect. With that, there's about 25 minutes left in our program, and that's about how much time we'd like to spend inside of each of our own individual rooms for those of you who are interested in individual institutions. And so I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat. Listen very carefully. We're going to put a link in the chat that leads to individual Zoom rooms where all of us will be sitting individually to talk to you more about your specific institution questions. So I will hand it over to Adam to leave any last comments.
While Jackie is doing that, I want to close, and then I'm going to ask each of my colleagues very quickly to go around and give a tip, because this session is really about helping you launch yourself into this process well. And I will tell you, and all of my colleagues will agree, everyone around you is going to have an opinion about your college search. Everyone is going to try to give you some advice. And so prepare now to be able to take that advice and work it into your process if it makes sense for you. But I think one of the things that is so important is that you are here, you're engaging, you're thinking, you're problem solving through this from the very start. And I just want to applaud you for attending today, because that really shows us that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. You're going to do a great job as you run this college search. So we'll just go around quickly and maybe just one pro tip, and then we'll close. We'll start with Amherst.
Thanks, Adam. So one tip, I'm going to cheat. I have 1.5 tips. So my one tip is be kind to yourself. Like Adam said, there are so many components of the application process, of the college search process, of the decision-making process. And all of that is just in, more regular times when we're not also in the midst of a pandemic, and when there aren't also all different kinds of things happening around the world every single day. And so do the best you can to take care of yourself through the process. We are here as a resource. This is my other half tip. We're all regular people. We love talking with you. One of the hardest parts for us about the virtual is that we don't get to talk to you in person. So feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to be a resource at any time and answer any sorts of questions you have, no matter how small or large you think they are.
Great. Bowdoin.
Cheater thing, pro tip. Spell out your acronyms, especially for international students who often have acronyms that are known in your space but not ours. Just spell them out, exceed the words, and just make sure that we understand what the societies that you are and clubs are that you're telling us about.
That's great. Carleton.
Pro tip. My pro tip is it's okay if you change your mind, right? I know sometimes you have really specific plans at this age. I want to major in biology, or I want to major in history, or I want to go to this school in this part of the world. It's okay if you change your mind. That's part of human nature, to change your mind. And part of our liberal arts institutions or philosophy is to give you time to explore and grow. And so we want you to come and maybe change your mind if you choose to come to our places. It's okay to change your mind.
That's great. Swarthmore.
All right. One tip I have is try to connect with current students as much as you can, right? As much as we're all experts about the schools that we represent, current students will give you the most, genuine, unfiltered answers to all of your questions because, they are an actual student right there, right? So talk to students who might share your hometown, your experiences, your backgrounds, and really get a sense of what life is like for a student like yourself at one of our schools.
Williams.
Thank you. I would say for me, it's make sure that you consider more than just one thing in the process. So whatever that is, if that's academics, make sure you consider more than just the actual classes you can take at that school. Think about your entirety of your experience. And that's where I think the power of these residential campuses and communities can come in, because it's not just with this globalized world and the internet, we all can have access to the same books and materials and things like that, but there's more that goes into that learning. So I would say consider all of that and be open to all of it.
Excellent. Mine is just apply. think about this as a process of self-discovery. Yes, some numbers are going to come into play at some point, but all of us care about numbers, but I'll tell you, we care about people more. And one of the things that we often see is that students self-select out of the applicant pool because they think, oh, I'll never get in. Oh, I don't have a chance. Well, you do. And research and education and thoughtful reflection improve those chances, because at our core, we all admit people, not numbers, and those people come to schools and create communities. And that is really what we're in the business of doing centrally. So thank you so much for your time with us. And Jackie will tell us what to do next.
Yes, now is the moment. So we'll give it a second for you guys to click on that link, and then this meeting will end. So this meeting will end and we will all be in our individual breakout rooms for about the next 20 minutes for you to ask us any individual questions that you'll have. So thank you all on behalf of my colleagues. Thank you all so much for taking some of your, again, morning, afternoon, or evening to come talk to us, and come talk to us more in those rooms. So we're all going to leave here and go into those individual rooms. We will see you there. Take care.